you can always spin it that way. My brother-in-law had a professor in medical school who was an atheist and unbeliever, and his reason for atheism was, he said, the liver is so complicated, God couldn't make one. And when you look at the human cell and you look at the complexities of the world around us, and there's much more going on. There's much more of a prima facie case for a designer than I think the militant atheists want to let on. The center of my closing remarks, I'd like to address, speaking for wicked, delusional idiots everywhere. The problem that I think many Christians have when they hear someone like Christopher say this, that this is theological fascism, it's Orwellianism, and that sort of thing. We want to say as Christians, our immediate reflex action is, no, we're not. We're not trying to be wicked. We're motivated by love. If we believe these things, then surely we're going to share the good news with others. So this is not motivated by wickedness. No, we're not wicked. We're not delusional. I used to be delusional. I used to take drugs all the time until Jesus saved me, and that sort of thing. We try to answer it at that level. But I want to encourage you and leave this with you. When Christopher says wicked, delusional idiot, says who? In what universe? What universe? What does the universe have to be like in order for wicked, delusional idiots to exist? All right? What kind of world is that? It's not a time and chance materialistic universe. In a time, chance, matter and motion universe, there's no such thing as a wicked, delusional idiot. There's no such thing. Christopher is telling you these things, but he doesn't have a chair. He's floating up here. I tell you, come look. There's no foundation for his moral claims. There's no foundation for what he's saying. And so consequently, it's good polemics. Christopher is a gifted wordsmith. He's a gifted wordsmith. But he's got these moral judgments suspended from an invisible skyhook somewhere. Right. And I don't know where the bolts are.
So I don't have to be a particularly good wordsmith to point out to you what you must have noticed. I had to come all the way to Dallas to be told that because I don't believe in the supernatural, the material world doesn't exist. Because I don't believe in the supernatural, I haven't got a chair to sit on. I mean, I'm sorry, Douglas, I've heard you do better than this. Now, so Mr. Denison.
That was an analogy.
Mr. Denison, I don't want to seem insensitive about the friends of yours who are undergoing this distress, but I want to draw attention to something that you said. You said that their belief in Jesus, in their suffering, was their only hope. In other words, what you're saying, what you're asking me and others to believe, is that if Christianity is false, these people have no hope. Now, do you really mean that? Would it be the case that if Christianity by chance was found to be just one of many other man-made faiths, a case for which I think can quite strongly be made, that it isn't really that much different from all kinds of other religions that humans have invented for themselves, that we would therefore be condemned to utter despair? There'd be nothing to hope for, nothing to live for, nothing. This is a counsel of despair. Mm-hmm. It's both too arrogant, it seems to me, too coercive in its implications, and also too abject, too slavish. It seems to me to exhibit both those deformities. I'm not an admirer of C.S. Lewis, but I did think it was very brave of him to say, I'm going here to the delusional point, very brave of him to admit that if Jesus of Nazareth was not the Son of God, the incarnate Son, the Redeemer, if he wasn't that, then his doctrines, his teachings, were the ravings of an evil, mad person. Amen. But you cannot say, as people like Thomas Jefferson and the deists used to say, he wasn't divine, but he was a great moral preacher. No. These doctrines are immoral. They say, leave your family. Don't care about the morrow. Don't care about thrift or investment or your loved ones. Do give up everything. Follow me, because the earth is coming, this veil of tears is coming to an end very soon. And vicarious redemption is available. And you'll go to hell if you don't do everything I say. And these would be delusional, idiotic ravings, and Lewis was brave enough and honest enough for once in his writing career to make this clear.
1 minute. 1 minute.
Okay, now I'll close on Douglas's question to me, because it was a good challenge. He says, why do I care particularly about things like the Inquisition or the Crusades? I would add the Jihad. And so, why do I find these things more repulsive than others? I'll give you a simple answer. There's enough trouble from people who want to run my life, from people who want to tell me what to do, to take my property, to order me about, to tell me what books I can read, who I can sleep with and in what position, what food I can eat or not and on what day. There's enough coercion and threatened coercion without some other close relative of a chimpanzee, some other primate telling me that he's got the right to tell me these things because he's doing God's will. The initial emancipation, the first emancipation an intelligent human being has to be able to come up with is this. The beginning of freedom and liberty is to say, there isn't a human who can do that to you. There is no human who knows God's will. There's no human being who can appoint himself and say he's got God on his side, and that's why he has the right to tell you what to do. This is the first and greatest of our emancipations. All others flow from it. You'll all feel very much better when you let go belief in the celestial North Korea. Thanks.
Bill.
Well, as I look at my notes from our discussion today, I see on the one hand about 10 arguments that have been offered for theism or Christian theism, almost none of which have been responded to or refuted. The argument from contingency for why something exists rather than nothing. The argument from the beginning of the universe, explained in philosophy and cosmology. The argument from the fine-tuning of the universe was not answered adequately. The mere mortality of human beings doesn't in any way show that the universe was not fine-tuned for the existence of intelligent life. The moral argument has not been refuted because it's been simply subject to the confusion between the basis for moral values and how we come to know moral values. And the argument is not that you need to believe in God in order to behave properly. The argument rather is that without a transcendent foundation, there is no objective moral value. These are just the sociological, biological spin-offs of the evolutionary process. The ontological argument hasn't been dealt with. The argument from biological complexity and DNA information, Lee's argument from consciousness, mind, Doug Wilson's argument from the impossibility of rationality in a naturalistic universe in which everything is just fizzing rather than the result of rational thought. And finally, Denison's appeal to self-validating experience. Seems to me all of these provide very powerful reasons for thinking that theism is true, and then the radical personal claims and the resurrection of Jesus, which I think are historically well validated, provide good grounds for believing Christian theism is true. So I have to disagree with Jim Denison when he says atheism isn't falsifiable. On the contrary, I think it is very plausibly falsified, not simply falsifiable. It is falsified. Now, on the other hand, I hear one argument basically for atheism tonight, and that would be the argument from the problem of suffering. But here the difficulty is that Christopher admitted that, given Christian theism, it is an internally coherent worldview. Denison and Wilson explained that given God's desire to create human beings who have freedom to make significant moral choices, and that there will be justice and deserts appropriately given in the afterlife, it makes perfectly good sense to think that there would be a world that would be suffused with natural and moral suffering. And Christopher doesn't refute the point. He just then says, but I don't see any reason to believe this worldview is true. But we've just given 10 reasons to think that it's true. And none of these have been refuted. So I think Christopher needs to come to grips more rigorously with the arguments. I also heard from Christopher what I expected to hear today: colorful phraseology, rhetoric, congenial personality, but little intellectual engagement with the substance of the argument. And so I want to invite Christopher for our debate on April 4th at Biola University, that you do some more preparation and come prepared to engage specifically with these arguments, because I think that's where the real issue is going to lie. We need to ask ourselves, are there good grounds for believing Christian theism is true? Or is this, as others have suggested, simply a dislike of the Christian God that leads one to say, I'm not going to believe in him because I wouldn't like it if it's true? That would not be a rational way to behave. It's got to be more based not simply on personal preference.
No such assertion was ever made by me.
No, that was the accusation made of you, and I think that it sticks, given the absence of argument on your side and your admission that Christian theism isn't a coherent worldview if it has good evidence for it. So I think we need to see more specific engagement with the arguments that have been offered tonight.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. That concludes our discussion.